Consider for a moment this statement, the opening lines of a much longer statement signed by 30 scientists.
Creationism and intelligent design are not scientific theories, but they're portrayed as scientific theories by some religious fundamentalists who attempt to have their views promoted in publicly funded schools. There should be enforceable statutory guidance that they may not be presented as scientific theories in any publicly funded school of whatever type. But this is not enough. An understanding of evolution is central to understanding all aspects of biology. The teaching of evolution should be included at both primary and secondary levels in the national curriculum and in all schools.
One of the people who put his name to that is Professor Richard Dawkins, who's live on PM, along with Simon Morris, who's head of science at an Outer London comprehensive school. He teaches across the syllabus, including biology, chemistry and physics. And Simon Morris, do you find much to disagree with in that statement from some of your fellow scientists?
Well, yeah, I'm a little bit worried because it sort of comes across in a bigoted fashion. We demand that evolution should be taught, and it is science, and anyone who disagrees with us is wrong. Whereas really it's about beginnings, and beginnings are very difficult for scientists to test and reprove because they only happen once, and we don't have people there. So there doesn't seem to be any evidence for spontaneous evolution, and there doesn't seem to be any evidence for spontaneous ex nihilo creation either. So both of them really are theories, and neither of them perhaps is science. It depends what science is.
What do you teach in your classrooms?
I try to teach people deductive logical reasoning, and we base this from science that experiments are repeatable, we can learn lessons from that, and we can collect data. So it's to do with repeatable observation, but it's not just about collecting data. You then have to use that data to explain the world we live in it, and ultimately our place within the world.
What sort of weight should be given to intelligent design, for example, which, as I understand, that's something you believe in?
I don't know about weight. You see, as I said before, it depends what science is. I teach my children to pass exams, basically. It's my job to mediate the knowledge so they can understand. And a lot of the science curriculum is very fact-based. And by fact, we talk about repeatable observations that we can see and that we can perform. And it's explaining how they fit together in our world view that helps students understand it and be able to repeat it and pass their exams. And so the idea about sort of creative design is just another possibility, a way of viewing how these facts that we collect could fit together. So I don't think you should have a large bias from that point of view. I think it's more philosophical. But we have to know the reason why we're studying things, because all we've managed to do is find out how things work in a more intricated and clever manner. So the more we find out about how they work, the more we then end up finding more questions. And none of these ever give us any of the whys. We just know that cells now work this way, and we don't know why they work that way or what starts them off, but we have a very complicated, clever way of seeing how they go, and that can help us change people's lives and improve medicine or change the design of materials depending on which area you're working in, or understand the maths, or be able to explain why a positron could exist.
Well, let me bring in Richard Dawkins, and I suppose I should give you a chance, first of all, to respond to the idea that statement is almost bigoted.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm all for science being taught in a questioning way. We must foster critical thinking, and that's fine, and there's plenty of critical thinking going on in science. What Mr. Morris seems to be basing his case on is the idea of science being repeatable, and he doesn't think evolutionary theory is repeatable because it only happened once. That, of course, is a very narrow view of repeatability. Just because it happened in the past doesn't mean that we can't do repeatable observations, for example, on the fossil record, for example, on the molecular genetics of living species. These are all repeatable observations or experiments that we can do. So even though each evolutionary event may have only happened once in the past, nevertheless, the whole evolutionary process is amply supported by multifarious, repeatable observations.
Simon Morris.
Well, that's interesting, because he said, I can look at the data, I can look at the data, I can look at the data, and I can look at the data. And in fact, I can look at the fossil record. I'm not an apologetist, if that's the correct word. I teach science, and I've only skimmed through things, so I'm sure he has greater knowledge than me. But The fossil record is about buried things, and we're not sure how old these things are.
Well, we are sure how old they are. We know very well how old they are. We know it from radioactive dating.
Right, and we could sit here and we could argue about radioactive dating.
Well,
we
how?
Could talk about potassium argon capture, and we could talk about uranium depletion, and we could talk about those things. But my point about the sciences that I'm involved in is it's something that we can repeat. The actual act of the science, not the act of the observation.
And Professor Dawkins, can I ask you what role you think creationism and intelligent design should have in any part of the curriculum in this country?
I think it's fine to teach religion in religious studies, and we have religious studies in the national curriculum, and I think that's fine. I'm actually in favour of teaching religious studies, and that is where creationism belongs. It isn't science. To evade the responsibility to give a scientific explanation by, in effect, saying a magic man did it or a wizard did it, is not an explanation in any sense you could possibly call scientific.
Do you agree it's possible to believe in intelligent design but not to be religious?
I find that rather hard to see how you could. I could be interested to hear if Mr. Morris can do that. I suppose you could just about say maybe life on this planet was designed by intelligent life on another planet. Francis Crick once rather tongue-in-cheek suggested that. But in that case, of course, you're still left with the problem of explaining where the life on the other planet came from. And then Francis Crick would certainly have agreed that that must have evolved.
Simon Morris, in the unlikely event you have a quick answer to that, please give it now.
Well, faith and religion is when you base an opinion on perhaps a lack of evidence. And although Mr. Dawkins has never seen evolution happen, he believes it does. Therefore, it is faith. There are consequences of his faith, though, and there are consequences of design faith. If a God does exist, or a creator, I'm not saying which one, whether it's Christian or Islam or something like that, then you have a responsibility to that God, and you have social restraint, and you have control. If we have evolution, which is a random process,
it is not a random process. Evolution
and we have selfishness at the centre.
Evolution is not a random process. Selfishness is not at the centre. It does not depend upon faith, because, as I said before, we can do repeated observations. This is proper science, and it's done on repeatable observations and even experiments.
Thank you both for joining us, Professor Richard Dawkins and Simon Morris. Our email address is pm@bbc.co.uk. Thank you. Now, let's go back to the dawn of time, or at least that's how it feels, Monday. A number of scientists put their names to a letter declaring creationism and intelligent design are not scientific theories, but they are portrayed as scientific theories by some religious fundamentalists who attempt to have their views promoted in publicly funded schools. There should be enforceable statutory guidance that they may not be presented as scientific theories in any publicly funded school of whatever type. That's what the scientists said, and we aired a discussion between the author of The God Delusion, Professor Richard Dawkins, and Simon Morris, who's head of science at an outer London comprehensive school. I don't know what it was, atmospherics in the ether, a change in the weather perhaps, but while we broadcast only one discussion, judging by the reaction, people heard all sorts of different things. Robert Goodwin wonders why we put people on the air when, in his opinion, they're wrong. Actually, he wonders why, oh why.
Why, oh why, do you give any time at all to these crackpot intelligent design idiots? You spoke with a professor and then gave equal weight to the comments of someone who is plainly wrong.
Robert, if I had a penny every time we broadcast someone who's plainly wrong... Anyway, Robert, you were saying?
Wrong on his basic facts, and then he has the gall to try and muddy the waters, as is the usual tactic of these people. Dawkins is right, the other man is a crackpot.
But Alan White heard the same discussion completely differently.
How encouraging to hear Mr. Dawkins going round in circles about observations of evolution. Darwinism is, of course, sheer conjecture and should never be taught as fact.
Ian White signs himself as a practising Christian.
Please don't have Richard Dawkins on your programme.
Dawkins.
Whenever I hear him, I am in great danger of taking a sledgehammer to my hi-fi system. Why do atheists have to be so arrogant? People such as Dawkins and Ludovic Kennedy have made a religion out of it and become very good at it too.
Although Sir Ludovic less so since he passed away in 2009. So, lots of support for the teacher in our discussion, less for Mr.
Dawkins.
Except there's this from Derek Moody.
That teacher should be suspended now. If he cannot understand and teach the simple process of evolution, he is not fit to teach anything. He's using a classic diversionary tactic. He is trying to describe a process, evolution, as if it were a starting point. Creationism cannot, for example, explain the evolution of differing religions, genres of music, or styles of fashion. Evolution, and even Darwin's theory, can. Creationism is never debated by scientists because there is nothing to debate, no underlying testable mechanism, whereas evolution, even biological evolution, is demonstrable daily. Your station even reported on, and was able to explain, the evolution of a new species of sparrow only this morning.
Tony Kirby says Simon Morris is completely wrong.
Simon Morris must have waited until the end of the article to drop his fatuous point about Richard Dawkins requiring faith to believe in evolution. He must have thought that there would be no chance to answer. He is, of course, completely wrong in that the evidence for evolution, its drivers, and its most improbable adaptations are there for all of us to see. It's called evidence. To say that faith is the belief in things without evidence, despite rational arguments to the contrary, tells us all we need to know. Give me rational thought over superstition, the supernatural, and fairies at the bottom of the garden every time.
But were these the right people to discuss these important matters? Martin Urrell heard the debate and declared,
Frankly, the teacher who you interviewed made mincemeat of Richard Dawkins.
But Dr. Lindsay Hall thought
it was monstrous to pit Dawkins against a poor, unsuspecting biology teacher.
So we disappointed everyone. Lorenzo Wood, this week's listener name of the week, writes,
In the modern vernacular, OMFG.
No idea what that means, and neither do you.
How is Simon Morris a science teacher? Notwithstanding the item was positioned as a debate, how were his flimsy and wrong-minded remarks about science unchallenged by the presenter?
Well, I was unclear as to who was wrong.
It's astounding. No wonder we're falling behind as a nation if that's what we call a science teacher. He should be summarily dismissed.
But Martin Beggs wanted to hear the teacher being challenged less.
I would have liked to have heard the science teacher finish his final response without interruption. Many people believe in Darwinian evolution because of the protestations of Professor Dawkins et al. And not because they are presented with evidence.
David Steele, with an E, got in touch.
Dear PM, if there was such thing as intelligent design, then we would have better knees. We would not have an appendix, and women would come with zip fasteners to simplify childbirth.